Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. The night she left, the house shook with her performance. She stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, her friends waiting outside with smug smiles and cheap champagne. She looked at me like she wanted a reaction, like she was daring me to beg. "I won't be defined as a man's wife anymore," she said, her voice sharp, triumphant. Then she slammed the door behind her, and their cheers carried down the street. I didn't chase her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't try to argue against her new start. I just sat there in the silence she left behind, calm, collected. Because the truth she didn't know was simple: she hadn't left me. She had walked straight into the trap she built for herself. For months, I had watched the shift. The secretive smiles at her phone, the late nights out with friends, the sudden obsession with independence. She thought she was untouchable, that she could rewrite our marriage while still reaping its comforts. What she didn't realize was that every careless word she spoke in this house had weight, and I had been recording. Not to blackmail, not out of paranoia, but out of clarity. I wanted the truth, unfiltered, preserved exactly as she had said it. And then there was the prenup. The contract she once signed without a second thought, convinced she'd never need to worry about it. A document she mocked, saying only insecure men cared about paperwork. She signed it anyway, waving it off as a formality. That formality was now my shield, my weapon, and her undoing. So when she walked out with cheers behind her, I didn't feel anger. I felt the stillness of a man who knows exactly how the story ends. She believed her new start would free her from me, would give her everything she thought she deserved. What she didn't know was that her new start was about to cost her everything. That night, I poured myself a drink, sat in the quiet living room, and replayed one of the recordings. Her voice filled the room, sharp and careless. "He's too easy. He'll never leave. I can do what I want, and he'll still be here." The arrogance in her tone made me smile. Because by the time she realized her mistake, it wouldn't be me begging for her to come back. It would be her, standing in the ruins of her own choices, finally understanding what silence really meant. And I was ready to let her learn that lesson. The morning after she left, my phone lit up with notifications. Not from her directly. Those were already silenced forever, but from mutual friends tagging me in posts. Her face was all over social media, smiling wide, champagne glass in hand, her friends circling her like cheerleaders at a parade. The caption read, "New chapter, new freedom, new me." I didn't comment. I didn't like or react. I just scrolled through every picture, memorizing the arrogance in her smile, the way she paraded her exit as if it were a victory. What she didn't realize was that every post she made, every picture she uploaded, was building the case for me. Because in the eyes of the court, perception matters. And nothing screams willful abandonment louder than bragging about walking away from a marriage while your friends cheer you on. So while she was busy curating her new start, I was curating something else. I called my lawyer and scheduled a meeting. We sat across from each other in a polished office, the prenup spread out on the table like a blueprint. Line by line, the protections were clear. If she walked away with nothing. No claim to the house. No claim to the accounts. No claim to the future I had built. But the prenup was only the beginning. That's when I pulled out the recordings. Her voice, sharp and dismissive, filled the small office as my lawyer leaned back in his chair. She had said it all herself, mocking me, bragging about independence, admitting she never planned to stay. Every careless word became a nail in the coffin of her own case. My lawyer smiled, slow and deliberate. "She's going to regret this," he said. I just nodded. Meanwhile, her posts grew bolder. Dinners with friends, late nights out, captions about finally living. She thought she was telling the world she was free. What she was really doing was telling the world she had abandoned her marriage without looking back. And I was letting her dig that hole deeper every single day. The irony was sharp. She believed her freedom started the night she slammed the door. But true freedom was mine, the quiet, strategic kind. The kind that doesn't need an audience. By the end of that week, the papers were drawn. Not filed yet. Just prepared, sitting in a folder on my desk, waiting for the exact moment I'd let them cut through her performance. She thought she was rewriting her story. What she didn't know was that I had already written the ending. The first cracks in her new start appeared faster than I expected. At first, she was still glowing from the rush of her exit, feeding on attention, soaking up the cheers. But reality doesn't care about applause. Reality sends bills. The mortgage came due, the car payment followed, and suddenly her curated freedom didn't look so glamorous. She had left with the clothes in her suitcase and the illusion that she was stepping into independence. What she hadn't realized was how much of her independence had been built on my quiet stability. I didn't have to cut her off. The prenup did that for me. She had no legal right to the house, no claim to the savings, no foothold in the accounts she once assumed were half hers. She had walked out with pride, but pride doesn't pay rent. Friends who once cheered her on grew distant. At first, they posted pictures together, clinking glasses, writing captions about fresh beginnings. But dinners turn expensive when the bill isn't split evenly. Nights out lose their sparkle when you're the only one struggling to cover them. Slowly, the posts of her surrounded by smiling faces became fewer, the smiles thinner, the glasses emptier. Meanwhile, I carried on quietly. The house was cleaner without her chaos. My nights were calmer without the arguments. I didn't need to brag online. My peace spoke louder than her captions ever could. She, on the other hand, began to falter. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she had asked to borrow money, framing it as a temporary setback. They laughed it off later, saying they had known she wasn't prepared for real independence. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need them. Every whisper confirmed what I already knew. Her new life was costing her more than she could afford. Then came the first message she tried to sneak through. A new number, a hesitant text. "Can we talk?" I read it once, then blocked it. My silence was the only reply she deserved. She had slammed the door with her own words. I wasn't about to reopen it just because her comfort had run out. And as the days stretched into weeks, her confidence eroded. The woman who had once left with her chin high and her friends cheering was now stumbling under the weight of her own choices. She had wanted freedom. Now she was paying for it, piece by piece. By the fourth week, the crowd that had cheered her new start had thinned. At first, her friends had been loud about supporting her. Group dinners, selfies with captions about empowerment, wine nights with fake laughter. But support has an expiration date when it's built on nothing but spectacle. Slowly, they began to vanish. One acquaintance mentioned to me, almost casually, that she'd started canceling plans. The reason? Money. She couldn't keep up with their pace anymore. The woman who had once bragged about freedom was now avoiding the very people who cheered her into it. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't just personal anymore. It was social. She was fading from the circles she once used to prop herself up. Then the whispers grew sharper. Someone who worked with one of her friends told me she had been complaining, saying I had set her up, that I had been too prepared, too calm. She didn't know about the recordings yet, but she was beginning to sense there was something more, something she couldn't control. And she was right. While she scrambled to hold her new life together, I was strengthening mine. My lawyer and I reviewed everything again. The prenup, the recordings, even her public posts. Every detail lined up perfectly. Her pride had built my case for me. She thought her words were power when she shouted them into the world. But those same words had become chains she couldn't break. One evening, I sat alone in the quiet house, listening to her voice echo from one of the recordings. She had been on the phone with a friend, laughing, saying she could do whatever she wanted because he'll never leave. He's too soft. I replayed it twice, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. Those words weren't a wound anymore. They were evidence. And soon, they'd be more than that. They'd be the nail in the coffin of her claims. Meanwhile, her attempts to reach me grew sloppier. Another message from another new number, this time longer. I made a mistake. Can we meet? I blocked it just as quickly as the last. Every time she tried, I answered with silence. And the silence hurt more than rejection. It forced her to face herself. By the end of that week, the woman who once left with cheers behind her was standing alone, surrounded by bills, abandoned by friends, and cornered by her own arrogance. And I hadn't even made my move yet. The morning I filed the papers, I didn't feel nervous. I didn't even feel triumphant. I felt calm. The kind of calm that comes when the pieces finally settle exactly where you place them. My lawyer slid the folder across the table, the prenup attached, the recordings cataloged, the social media posts printed and timestamped. Each one a brick in the wall she had built against herself. By noon, the documents were official. The quiet life I had been building was no longer just personal, It was legal. She would receive the notice soon enough, and for the first time since she stormed out, she would realize the silence wasn't just silence. It was strategy. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, I heard she had broken down at a friend's apartment after being served. The same friends who once toasted to her freedom now sat in uneasy silence as she tried to explain how it had all gone wrong. She said I had blindsided her, that I had set her up. But the truth was simpler. She had walked straight into this with her eyes open. She just never believed the man she dismissed would follow through. Meanwhile, I went about my days as if nothing had changed. Work, gym, weekends with friends. My world grew lighter, sharper, while hers grew heavier. The contrast was obvious to anyone watching. I didn't need to explain myself. People could see who was unraveling and who was thriving. The whispers around town grew. Some said she had overplayed her hand. Others mentioned the prenup, wondering aloud why she had signed it so carelessly. She avoided those conversations, but avoidance doesn't erase reality. Every bill, every legal letter, every unanswered message was another reminder that her new start came with a price tag she couldn't afford. The irony was almost poetic. She had slammed the door with her friends cheering her on, thinking I'd crumble in her absence. Instead, she was the one crumbling, piece by piece, as the safety net disappeared beneath her. And I hadn't raised my voice once. By the end of that week, she reached out again, through a mutual friend this time, asking if I could at least sit down with her, just to talk. The friend's eyes searched mine when they delivered the message, waiting to see if I'd bend. I simply shook my head. Because once papers are signed, there's nothing left to talk about. The next move was predictable. When strength failed, she turned to pity. Suddenly, her social media changed. Gone were the triumphant smiles, the champagne toasts, the captions about freedom. In their place appeared vague posts about betrayal, about heartbreak, about being misunderstood. She wanted sympathy, a new audience to reassure her that she was the victim. But sympathy is a fragile currency, and people spend it carefully. The same friends who once cheered her on now scrolled past her updates without comment. A few even unfollowed her, tired of the performance. And the ones who did respond asked questions she didn't want to answer. What happened? I thought you were happy. Every vague word she wrote only fueled the whispers that she had lost control. I didn't engage. I didn't defend myself, didn't correct the story. My silence did all the work. People filled the gaps themselves, and the more she tried to convince them, the more they doubted her. One evening, a mutual friend told me she had broken down in front of them. She had admitted that things weren't going the way she expected, that I wasn't reacting like she thought I would. She confessed she never believed I'd actually enforce the prenup, never believed I'd have proof stacked neatly against her. She said she thought I would fight for her, beg her to stay, argue until I lost myself in her chaos. Instead, I had left her alone with her choices. That admission wasn't meant for me to hear, but it found its way back anyway. And when it did, I felt nothing but clarity. She wasn't crying over losing me. She was crying over losing control. Meanwhile, I stayed steady. Work, gym, evenings out with people who had no connection to her. Every step I took away from her world made mine stronger. And every attempt she made to pull sympathy back toward herself only highlighted how far she had fallen. By the end of that week, she posted a long, emotional message about how hard it is to start over, how unfair life can be, how people abandon you when you need them most. But buried in her words was the truth she didn't intend to show. Her new start was crumbling, and I didn't have to say a word. Her weakness was speaking louder than anything I could have told the world. By the 7th month, her tactics had been stripped bare. She had tried triumph. She had tried pity. Both had failed. What was left was desperation, dressed in the disguise of intimacy. She showed up one evening, unannounced, standing on my porch with a small box in her hands. Inside were old photographs, vacations we once took, holidays spent with family, nights we thought would define forever. She held them out like they were proof of something unbreakable, her eyes searching mine for a spark of nostalgia. I took the box, set it aside without opening it, and let the silence settle between us. Her voice trembled as she reminded me of our first apartment, the way we used to stay up late planning a future, the promises we made when things were new. She said she still remembered the sound of my laugh, the way I looked at her when she walked down the aisle. She said those memories had to mean something. They did mean something, once. But now they meant clarity. They meant proof that I had given her everything, and she had chosen arrogance instead. The memories weren't anchors for me. They were mirrors, reflecting how far she had strayed from the woman she used to be. When she reached for my hand, I let her fingers brush against mine for a moment before I stepped back. The look on her face said more than words ever could. For the first time, she realized that even intimacy, her final card, had no hold over me. She tried again, softer this time. She said she missed me, that she needed me, that she was ready to change. I let her speak until the words ran out. Then I told her quietly, change isn't a promise you make when you're losing. It's the choice you make before you destroy everything. Her eyes filled with tears, her mouth open to respond, but I closed the door before she could. That night, I opened the box she left behind. I sifted through the photographs slowly, one by one. Then I placed them in a drawer, shut it, and didn't look again. Because the past has no power over a man who has already stepped into his future. And as I turned off the light, I knew she finally understood. Nostalgia doesn't rebuild what arrogance burned. After her last attempt, I stopped expecting anything from her. My focus shifted entirely to myself. For years, I had lived inside the storm she created, measuring my steps by her moods, my silence by her noise. But now, the air was clear, and every breath felt like a beginning. I changed my routines. The gym became more than an outlet. It became a sanctuary. I pushed harder, ran farther, rebuilt myself until the mirror no longer reflected the man she once dismissed. Colleagues started to notice. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years reached out. People who had once only known me as her husband now saw me as myself again. I joined new circles, men who valued discipline, people who weren't interested in gossip but in growth. Weekend trips replaced wasted nights. Business opportunities replaced arguments. I wasn't escaping her anymore. I was building something beyond her reach. And word spread. She heard about it. I knew she did, because mutual acquaintances started dropping hints. They mentioned she had asked questions about me, about who I was spending time with, about why I seemed different. Some told me she had grown quiet when she heard the answers. Others said she had tried to pretend she didn't care. But silence has a way of betraying the truth. One evening, I ran into her by accident at a restaurant. She was sitting with two friends, but when she saw me walk past, her eyes locked on mine. I nodded politely and kept moving. She tried to smile, but it was faint, brittle. The contrast between us was undeniable. She looked drained, weighed down. I looked lighter, sharper, untouchable. Later that night, a message tried to slip through again from another new number. You look good. Can we talk? I blocked it without hesitation. My silence wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. She needed to understand that she wasn't part of this new chapter, not even as a footnote. By then, I had stopped thinking about her except in moments like these, moments where her shadow appeared but no longer reached me. The man she had once controlled was gone. The man standing in his place didn't need her, didn't miss her, and didn't even hate her. He was beyond her, and she knew it. That was the punishment she never expected. Not my anger, not revenge, but the simple reality that I had become unreachable. It was late on a Sunday when she made her final move. I heard the knock on my door, hesitant at first, then more insistent. I opened it, and there she was. No makeup this time, no mask of confidence. Her eyes were red, her voice cracked before she even spoke. She asked if she could come in, just to talk. For a moment, I let her stand there. Then I stepped aside, not out of softness, not out of sympathy, but because I wanted her to understand what silence feels like when there's no escape. She sat on the edge of the couch, her hands trembling, her words spilling out in fragments. She said she was sorry. She said she had been reckless, arrogant, blind. She admitted she thought she could do better on her own, but now she realized what she had thrown away. She begged for a second chance, promised she would change, promised she would respect me the way she should have from the beginning. Her tears fell freely, her voice breaking with every sentence. She reached for my hand, her fingers shaking. But I didn't take it. I just watched, calm, steady, letting her unravel in the silence she had once demanded. When she finally stopped, when the sobs quieted into shallow breaths, she looked at me with eyes that searched desperately for hope. That was when I spoke. Slowly, clearly, without emotion. You're not too late because I hate you. You're too late because you made sure there was nothing left to save. Her face collapsed. She tried to protest, tried to tell me we could rebuild, but I cut her off with silence. Not anger, not cruelty, just the final truth she couldn't fight. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it. She hesitated, her body frozen in place, as if staying silent might keep her here. But eventually, she rose and walked past me, her shoulders shaking, her head bowed. I closed the door behind her, soft and final. No slam, no theatrics, just a quiet ending to the storm she created. And as I stood in the empty room, I realized the irony. She had spent years believing words were her power, but in the end, it was my silence that destroyed her. The day of the final hearing came quietly, without drama. I walked into the courthouse calm, documents in hand, my lawyer beside me. She arrived minutes later, pale, her once confident stride reduced to small, hesitant steps. There were no friends cheering her this time. No smiles, no champagne. Just silence. The same silence that had followed her ever since the night she slammed the door. The judge reviewed the prenup, the evidence, the recordings. Her voice echoed through the room as clips were played, her laughing, dismissing, bragging about how I'd never leave. Each word cut deeper into her case, not because I twisted them, but because they were hers. Every syllable was a confession she couldn't take back. When the ruling came, it was swift. The prenup stood. Assets protected. Claims denied. She left the courthouse with nothing. No house, no savings, no control. Just the weight of her own choices pressing down with every step. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look her way. My silence was enough. That evening, I went home to a house stripped clean of her presence. Her photos were gone, her belongings already removed, her shadow erased from every corner. It didn't feel empty. It felt lighter, sharper, alive. For the first time in years, the space was mine, and mine alone. Later, a final message slipped through from another new number. Just a single line. Can we start over? I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it without replying. Some questions don't deserve answers. Because the truth was simple. She didn't want me. She wanted the life she had lost, the stability she thought she could walk away from without consequence. But that life no longer existed for her. The last time I saw her, it was by accident, passing on the street. She looked older somehow, worn down, as if the weight of everything had finally caught up. She opened her mouth to speak, but I shook my head once and kept walking. No anger, no explanation, just calm distance. And that was the end. She once said she wouldn't be defined as a man's wife. She was right. She wouldn't be defined by me anymore. She would be defined by her own arrogance, her own mistakes, her own silence. And as for me, I wasn't defined by her at all. I was free. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.